failing by yourself in your own startup or joining another startup?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's just a very, very good question.
You didn't want
Yeah. So I failed basically a few times. Yeah. Got lucky eventually, like in the 7th time. What would I do looking back? I think looking back, I try and find. I think the highest risk companies are, 3 to 20 people. They're, very, very high rate of failure, and if you can kind of punch through the first 2 or 3 years and continue a kind of the launch velocity is fast. That can be an incredible environment to work in. So, I'll give the example. So, one of our teams, some of our teams are run by very experienced people. So, there's somebody who's about 50 years of age, used to run communications in Europe for Google. He used to edit, he's the news editor of the Times in England. He runs our kind of media and content team. But then our growth team, which is also a very, very significant team, is now run by a 23-year-old who's younger than everybody else on that team. And he couldn't possibly get that opportunity if we weren't growing, very, very fast, where we had somebody that was in the company for 2 years, he joined straight out of university, and he really kind of got into this space and an opportunity kind of opened up. Those are the most kind of wonderful circumstances to find yourself in. You look to the Marissa Myers or the Sheryl Sandbergs, they happen to just be in the right place at the right time, just as the company was kind of reaching towards the stratosphere, and their careers were just massively accelerated. If you can get that opportunity, that you get super fast career acceleration, then you're left with 2 great options, which is continue your trajectory in that company or move to another super high growth company and become a very successful executive by a very young age, or you can jump off with all that experience and set up your own company. And many of the entrepreneurs that are the most successful, certainly in Silicon Valley, many of them have been inside these kind of very, very rapidly growing companies. They've had some level of responsibility, probably run a team, and then they jump off and they do it themselves. So that would be
I'm sorry, Jay.
My feeling on that is it's presented as if they're mutually exclusive options, but I don't believe that they are. There are 168 hours in a week, and people who are younger generally have a little bit more energy, and so working at a startup does not preclude you from working on your own startup in the remaining hours, and basically and working on that with other people. There are very many people that I know that have started businesses that way, and generally people that are working in the startup are pretty happy with people going on to spin out and start other things. So that may be something that you can do as well.
Yeah.
One question for Jay. I just understand this as someone who got to sort of firsthand just about Uber and typically from, and I know you're talking about Hailo or successful independent options before this. Obviously, with that as you are you worried about the rise of Uber or whether it could supplant you or overtake you now in New York or keeping a different Uber?
So is Jay worried about the rise of Uber?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that what has happened in this this market is frankly it's grown even faster than I had anticipated, to the extent where it's outstripped in a lot of cities, where Dublin is actually not one of them, but in a lot of cities it's outstripped the supply of taxis. So in the U.S. generally there are not that many taxis per per city, and they're highly regulated and highly capped. And our thesis had always been if you sign up on the taxis, you'd be able to get cash flow demand. What was actually happening is the demand is skyrocketing. Now that's a great thing for for everybody in nobody markets. And so in places like like Dublin, where Hailo has such a great lock on the supply, it's not that Uber and other companies have not been trying to sign up drivers and unseat them, but the same kind of just market economics that make it very difficult for people to compete with Uber in San Francisco make it very difficult for people to compete with Hailo in Dublin, which is that the drivers are extremely happy, they know the system, they're making lots of money, they weren't making money before, and there's no reason for them to find an alternative, and there's no time for them to find an alternative, even if they haven't. Certainly it's not for lack of resources that Uber has not tried to enter the market in Dublin. I don't know what his actual pedigree is.
You're a nice guy. You have to be a bit of a bastard to dominate an industry.
So I believe that that would be the worst lesson that you could learn from Google. And by the way, the story is not played out yet. So everyone is let's wait until everything comes out and the IPO or whatever it is to make conclusions. But there are a lot of entrepreneurs who basically look at Uber versus Lyft, because Logan is a very nice guy as well, isn't the best. And Uber versus us, and they basically say, wow, it must be because of the over-aggressiveness and lack of ethical standards of the company that basically these guys won. I don't actually believe that that's true. And I believe that people would be wrong to learn those lessons. Did they have some lucky breaks? Yeah, probably. Did they cut corners? Absolutely. They admitted it as much. Is that going to hurt them in the long run? Probably is, right? So, the thing is that when you're in this business, you realize when you've done a couple of startups, which both me, Logan, and Travis have all done, or you should realize that there's always something else that you have to do, and your reputation is a pretty valuable asset. You want to have people that want to work with you in the next one, because there's always another quarter through that's incoming. And so, it is pretty short-sighted to sit there by yourself, if you had to cut tons of corners to do it, to think that the dominating market was worth it. I don't think that would give you the kind of satisfaction that I am seeking, when I go in and try and build a business. And I think there are examples of many entrepreneurs that are far less fierce, but far less, but have been far more effective than Travis.
And one question right here.
Mr. Jay, just before you launched Hailo, before your first round of investment, what did it look like? Was it just a sketch on a piece of paper, or was it an new app?
That's a really good question. So at the time that we did the investment, we didn't have a functional demonstration version of it, even because we had 2 engineers, but we were just in the planning stages of how to do it. We needed a lot more engineers in order to actually even build a functional prototype, because back at the time that we're doing this in 2010, there was a lot of unknown things, a lot of stumbling blocks to actually building even everything up. So instead, what we did was we focused on building the kind of product flows and basically how it would look, and building a really concise pitch deck. And we used the pitch deck plus the fact that some of us had worked together before and had a lot of experience in this particular domain to get our first money, and then we use that money to build a prototype, and then we went from there. But people do it very differently. When you guys go to raise money for your first business, you probably won't have as much of a track record behind you, unless you've been doing stuff on the side during university. So the more that you can show and that is tangible will make it much easier and much less risky for investors to fund.
1 or 2 more questions. Yeah, this gentleman.
I just moved to Dublin 2 weeks ago from California, and I went to Berkeley, so really wanted to start culture there. And one of the biggest problems I see is that a lot of students are trying to build apps or ideas that are not really adding a lot of social value or creating things that really change the societal and practical problems we face. How does government or society incentivize the creation of technology that really helps us solve big problems, rather than just creating that small game iPhone that's not really going to make a big difference in people's lives?
Well, I think Bill Gates had a good answer to this. Somebody asked Bill, it just seems like there's a whole lot of silly ideas coming out of Silicon Valley these days, and not many good ones. And he said, well, you always needed 9 silly ideas to have one idea that kind of changed the world. You probably need 99 silly ideas for one, maybe 999 silly ideas for one. And yeah, can governments do more? I think just investing in education is probably pretty critical. and in the case of this country, doing things that actually help advanced manufacturing or kind of tech companies develop. So if you look at the OECD statistics for the proportion of people that graduate from our third level institutes that are overqualified for the jobs available in this economy, it's higher than anywhere else in the OECD. We have the greatest glut of overqualified people you could possibly imagine. So we have, in theory, an amazing education system, but actually, if you look at the OECD statistics for that, we now have pretty much a below average OECD education system, but we have a rock bottom indigenous kind of industrial policy that's our kind of set of policies that have created anything vaguely resembling kind of some advanced or interesting companies, or at least a substantial set of companies that can provide employment relative to the skills that are actually available in the marketplace. So when politicians are asked on the radio, isn't it curious that so many of the people leaving Ireland, so many of the young people leaving Ireland, aren't people that don't have jobs, they're people that have jobs. And I would say that the reason that they're leaving is, unfortunately I'm going to be grand here, is unfortunately because the jobs in this country, there aren't enough good jobs, and that's a massive failing. So in this country, we do a great job at rolling out the red carpet, literally, for Americans that come to this country. Like literally, we have rolled out the red carpet. Ministers have showed up with a red carpet and dancing girls and fiddles and stuff, because he bought a golf course, because that's like strategically very important. So we do a great job rolling out a red carpet for Americans. I mean, it would be great if we got to a point where we did an even better job rolling out a red carpet for, you know, kind of advanced or strategically significant or important sectors that are emerging out of Ireland. Right now, I'm not too sure we do a particularly fantastic job. If you look at something like Enterprise Ireland, actually most of their money goes to R&D grants for pretty antiquated businesses like meat processors. They give out 50k here and there to kind of startups, but actually just look at their